This is Matthew Cratter from Trader University, and today I want to talk about Ray Dalio and how he has recently changed his stance on Bitcoin. This is really big for the Bitcoin space because Ray Dalio is one of the giants. He has been very bearish on Bitcoin, very negative about Bitcoin for many, many years, which doesn't make a lot of sense because he does understand, and he has taught me a lot about how the long-term debt cycle works, how we're at the end of one right now, and we're at the point where governments and central banks are beginning to devalue fiat currencies. This is why Dalio has been saying that cash is trash for a very long period of time, simply because the Fed and other central banks keep printing more cash, which makes it less valuable, but in the process drives up the price of scarce assets like stocks, gold, and Bitcoin. For some reason, it may just be an age thing. Dalio has been against Bitcoin, but that is all changing as of the last couple of weeks. So he had a long back and forth on Twitter saying I might be wrong about Bitcoin. And it's very interesting the reason that he said he might be wrong and that he was willing to reconsider everything was that Bitcoin was back up close to new highs. And I think this is very smart. Obviously, Dalio's a market veteran, and he pays attention to price action. And when you have a bubble popping, as we've seen before in my previous videos, if a bubble pops and then the asset comes right back up to its all-time highs, as Amazon did, as California housing market has done, etc., this is a reason to wake up and take notice, because true bubbles don't come back after they burst. Bitcoin seems to be one of those quote-unquote bubbles that is coming back. So Ray Dalio had a discussion on Twitter with lots of other people. He went radio silent for a couple weeks, and then this just out in the last 12 hours or so, in a Reddit AMA, Ask Me Anything, someone asked him about Bitcoin. And it's very interesting. I've copied and pasted here to make it a little bit easier to read. It looks like he has now come full circle and believes that Bitcoin has a place in investors' portfolios, along with some other digital currencies. He doesn't mention which ones. The only one he does single out is Bitcoin. He says, I think that Bitcoin and some other digital currencies, presumably he means by that cryptocurrencies, have over the last 10 years established themselves as interesting gold-like asset alternatives. And similar to gold in the sense that they have limited supply and they're mobile. Bars of gold is not exactly mobile, but it's certainly more mobile than real estate. So he suggests that Bitcoin could serve as a diversifier to gold and other such store of wealth assets. This is what we've been talking about, Bitcoin as a store of value. It's still very volatile. It's an emerging store of value in the same way that Apple and Amazon stocks were emerging stores of value and have now taken over that function. The main thing he says is, Ray Dalio says, is to have some type of these assets that have limited supply. And it's interesting, he keeps coming back to that because Bitcoin is the only one that really has a truly capped supply, a max supply that is credibly capped. There are companies like Ripple, XRP, cryptocurrencies like XRP, which supposedly have a cap, but there's a corporation behind them that can always print more. Bitcoin is very different. It's much more decentralized. There's not a corporation behind it. The same goes for Ethereum. There's no hard cap on ETH. So he says that the mistake that a lot of investors make is not having enough of these limited supply assets in their portfolios. And he says not enough people do that. And then he concludes by saying he still prefers gold over Bitcoin, which we would expect given his age. I believe he's 70 years old or around there. As far as Bitcoin relative to gold, I have a strong preference for holding those things which central banks are going to want to hold and exchange value in when they are trying to transact. I think here that Dalio really underestimates how central banks, just given the game theory of the situation, will be forced into Bitcoin. I would not be at all surprised if various central banks, whether in Venezuela, Iran, North Korea, China, some of these countries may, possibly even European countries, other Asian countries, other central banks in South America or Africa may have already started to accumulate Bitcoin. Bitcoin still has a very small market cap. These central banks can print money. It doesn't make any sense for them not to have a small exposure to it, especially these sort of more rogue, states like Venezuela or Iran. And so I think he underestimates here the role that Bitcoin can play as a reserve asset for central banks in the same way that gold has played this role historically. So I think that's where he sort of still has his blinders on. He doesn't quite understand how Bitcoin's portability and its really credibly capped max supply. The supply of gold is not really capped. There's a lot of it under the ocean. There's a lot of it in outer space. Very different from Bitcoin, where there are only 21 million Bitcoin. But I still think this is huge. What we basically have here is another billionaire endorsing Bitcoin and saying that it could be a part of people's portfolios. Obviously, he doesn't offer investment advice. I don't offer investment advice either. But you have to wake up and pay attention when billionaires are buying something and talking about it in the open. And we can be almost certain at this point that Dalio has begun to accumulate Bitcoin, given his change of mind and how he's now talking about it. If you're finding this video helpful, be sure to hit that subscribe button to see other videos like this. Now, as we said, billionaires have been scooping up Bitcoin, and everyone should ask themselves this question. Obviously, it's not intended as financial advice. This is a conversation you should have with your financial advisor. But all these billionaires, as I've been pointing out in videos over the last few months, have been scooping up Bitcoin. Is there a reason? If you don't own any Bitcoin, do you have a good reason? Do you really think you know more than these Bitcoins? There's a lot of humility that has to come in Bitcoin. I first learned about Bitcoin in 2011. I never bought any to hold for the long term until 2019. So it took me 8 years to really understand it. And this is as someone with a finance background who is living in Silicon Valley. So it's not an easy thing, but I think that it's a question that everyone needs to ask themselves, especially as we move into 2021 and this very bullish period of Bitcoin's 4-year cycle. If you don't own any Bitcoin, if you own zero, we're not talking about trying to buy a whole Bitcoin, which is beyond many people's budget, but you can buy fractional Bitcoin. You can buy as much as $50 or $100. And so this is a really weird situation where we see all these billionaires coming out, buying Bitcoin, telling us that they've bought Bitcoin or in the process of buying Bitcoin. And yet there's still a lot of people who are willing to chase various stock picks that billionaires do. So for example, if Warren Buffett buys something, but if billionaires are buying Bitcoin for some reason, they don't wake up and see what they're doing. Perhaps just because Bitcoin is a kind of new exotic asset that's a little bit more difficult to figure out than regular stocks. But I'll just go through quickly a few billionaires off the top of my head who we either know own Bitcoin or certainly appear to own Bitcoin. Jack Dorsey, founder of Twitter, the only thing that he has in his Twitter bio is Bitcoin. Obviously, we know what Square, his other company, has been doing in terms of moving their reserves into Bitcoin as well. So here's a billionaire who loves Bitcoin. Obviously, Peter Thiel. PayPal was originally intended as a new world currency. It failed at that, but succeeded in making its investors a lot of money. Peter's obviously, with his libertarian background, sort of a natural candidate for Bitcoin. And it was disclosed in 2017 that one of his VC funds, one of the founders' funds, had a large position in Bitcoin. I don't know if they still do. A couple other billionaires that are related to the Facebook scene, like Peter, the Winklevoss twins, who worked very early with Mark Zuckerberg. Huge Bitcoin bulls, saying that it's going to $500,000 per Bitcoin as a conservative target. These are guys who have always been ahead of the curve, whether it was with social media, social networking on the internet, or cryptocurrencies. And then obviously Michael Saylor, the CEO of MicroStrategy, that's just been buying hundreds of millions of dollars worth of Bitcoin, both personally and for his company, MicroStrategy. And then obviously Chamath as well, a large Bitcoin holder. I believe he said in one of his interviews that he holds 1 million Bitcoin. So these are the billionaires that own Bitcoin. There's only 21 million Bitcoin out there. if you don't own any, you've got to ask yourself, what am I doing? Why don't I own any when all of these billionaires are turning very bullish on it? Finally, wanted to finish with a piece of news that's also related to Michael Saylor. The pricing of those MicroStrategy convertible senior notes, which I talked about in yesterday's video, if you want to understand a little bit better. But they just came out this morning and announced the interest rate on those bonds, which is amazing. So what he's basically doing through MicroStrategy, which is the company he founded, he is raising approximately $400 million. Looks like they're actually raising more, $550 million, up from $400 million. They're selling bonds to raise as cash. They're selling senior convertible notes, and they're using the cash mostly to buy Bitcoin. And this way sort of levering up the company as a sort of hybrid between a software company and a Bitcoin ETF. But the really unbelievable thing on this is that the pricing on these notes, which they appear to be 5-year notes, they mature in 5 years, is just he'll only be paying interest income of 0.75%. I'm sorry, an interest rate of 0.75%, so less than 1% per year to borrow this huge amount of money. Basically, if Bitcoin goes up by more than 0.75%, so more than if it goes up more than approximately 1% a year, this will do very well. He can also pay this interest to the bondholders from operating cash flow or free cash flow of the company itself. So this is amazing. This is a rate that is lower than the 10-year U.S. Treasury rate. Obviously, this is a 5-year bond, so maybe we should compare it to the 5-year Treasury note, which is a little bit below this. But still, this is an unbelievable thing to be able to borrow money at such a low rate. And I think this demonstrates also why we will continue to see increasing capital flows into Bitcoin, both from corporations like MicroStrategy and from individual billionaires like Ray Dalio, who have figured out what's happening. Obviously, Ray Dalio, I'm not sure if I mentioned at the beginning of the video, runs the biggest hedge fund in the world, Bridgewater Associates. They obviously have a very big budget if they want to purchase Bitcoin. Maybe they already have, or if they want to add to their Bitcoin position. So this is amazing. We're not even at new all-time highs, and we have all these incredible developments coming. So I see a very, very long runway for Bitcoin over the next 12 months during the most bullish part of the cycle. And I think we easily get to $100,000 per Bitcoin by the end of next year, if not by next summer. If you found this video helpful, be sure to hit that subscribe and like button. Hit the notification bell if you want to be notified when I publish my next video. And let me know your questions and comments in the comment section below. Thanks a lot for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.